Today we will take a ride in one of the best cities of the world, in the capital of Russia, Moscow. My name is Sergey Baklikov. This is All of Russia channel on Baklikov Live. Hello everybody, and now, as Yuri Gagarin would say, поехали! So, we are starting a truly amazing journey through the center of Moscow. It begins now on one of the central streets, Tverskaya Street. Then, around the Kremlin, later we will turn at Christ the Savior Cathedral onto the Boulevard ring and finally make a full circle on the Garden Ring. Get ready for a long and beautiful journey. Okay, Moskva. The capital of Russia, a mega city, the largest city in Russia by population, 13.2 million people in 2025. Moscow is the largest city in Europe by area and population. Moscow is located in the west of Russia on the Moskva River in the interfluve of the Oka and Volga rivers. It is 680 kilometers southeast of St. Petersburg. Moscow has long been built using a radial ring layout. Thus, the city consists of several streets radiating from the center, including Tverskaya Street and rings. 3 transport rings, the Moscow Ring Road, MKAD, the Garden Ring, the 3rd transport ring, and the smallest Boulevard ring. The Moscow Metro was built on the same principle. The Circle Line, the Big Circle Line, and the Moscow Central Circle have connections to radial lines that link the center of Moscow with the outskirts. Moscow is the historical capital of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, the Tsardom of Russia, the Russian Empire, Soviet Russia, the USSR, and finally the Russian Federation. Archaeological data indicate the existence of an urban settlement in the area of the future Kremlin since the 11th century. The city's history spans at least 878 years. The first written mention of Moscow dates back to 1147, and exactly the year 1147 is considered the year of Moscow's birth. The Ipatiev Chronicle mentions that on April 4th, 1147, Yuri Dolgoruki, the Prince of Rostov-Suzdal, received his friends and allies in a town named Moskov, led by Sviatoslav Olegovich, the Prince of Novgorod-Seversky. In 1237-38, during the Mongol-Tatar invasion of Rus, Old Russia, Moscow was looted and burned, but it was soon restored. The Moscow Principality was separated from the Grand Duchy of the city of Vladimir in 1263 according to the will of Grand Prince Alexander Nevsky and given to his younger son Daniil Alexandrovich. Initially, the Moscow Principality, after its formation in 1263, included only lands along the middle course of the Moskva River. Its capital, Moscow, was the only city of the principality. The city's location at the intersection of trade routes contributed to its growth and rise. In the early 14th century, Moscow's territory expanded to include the Kolomna and Mozhaisk principalities. In the 14th century, Moscow's rise as a news center for all of Russia began, starting with Yuri Danilovich. The princes of Moscow bore the title of Grand Prince of Vladimir, which was considered supreme within northeastern Rus, Old Russia, and Novgorod. Under Prince Ivan I Danilovich Kalita, large-scale construction began in Moscow, and the first stone buildings appeared. Before that, the city was entirely wooden. In the 14th to early 15th century, Moscow was a major trade and craft city. In 1325, Metropolitan Peter of Rayton moved the Metropolitan See from the city of Vladimir, where it had been since 1299, to Moscow. After his death, Metropolitan Peter was canonized as a saint and miracle worker. Moscow, having become the spiritual capital of Old Russia, contributed to the unification of lands around the spiritual center and later the transfer of the de facto capital from the city of Vladimir to Moscow. In 1448, the Russian Church became de facto autocephalos, and in 1589, the Moscow Patriarchate was established. In 1613, in Moscow, Mikhail Fedorovich Romanov was anointed Tsar, marking the beginning of more than 300 years of the dynasty of Romanov's rule. His reign ended the more than 700-year rule of the dynasty of Ruriks. In 1712, the status of the capital of Russia was transferred to St. Petersburg. However, Moscow continued to develop and retained its significance. In 1755, Mikhail Lomonosov and Ivan Shuvalov, at the order of Empress Elizabeth, the daughter of Emperor Peter the Great, and Catherine I, founded Moscow University. During the Patriotic War of 1812, in the world more known as French invasion of Russia, Moscow was captured by Napoleon's forces and suffered greatly from fire. According to various estimates, up to 80% of the city's buildings were destroyed in the fire. The process of rebuilding Moscow took more than 30 years. In 1851, a railway connection was established between Moscow and St. Petersburg. In mid-August 1917, Moscow hosted All Russia State Conference managed by the Provisional Government. In 1918, after the Great October Revolution in Russian Empire, when power passed from the Romanovs family to the Bolsheviks, the Bolshevik government moved to Moscow from St. Petersburg, which at that year was called Petrograd, and Moscow became the capital of Soviet Russia. In the early 1920s, Moscow rapidly developed. In 1922, Moscow became the capital of the USSR. During this time, rapid industrial growth took place, with new factories and institutions created in the city. During the years of industrialization, Moscow quickly developed a network of higher and middle technical educational institutions. In the 1930s, a whole network of scientific research and project institutes in technical fields was created in Moscow. The vast majority of these were part of the Academy of Sciences of the USSR. At this time, the city's media also grew rapidly, with many newspapers being published, and regular television broadcasting was organized in 1939. The population grew rapidly in Moscow. From 1.8 million in 1917, it reached 4.2 million in 1939. During the World War II, Moscow housed the State Defense Committee and the General Staff of the Red Army, and a people's militia was formed. More than 160,000 people in that. In the winter of 1941-42, the famous Battle of Moscow took place, in which Soviet troops achieved their first major victory over the Wehrmacht since the beginning of World War II. In October 1941, German troops advanced to Moscow. Many industrial enterprises were evacuated, and the evacuation of government institutions to the city of Kuybyshev, now called Samara, began. On October 20th, 1941, martial law was introduced in Moscow. However, despite this, on November 7th, a military parade took place on Red Square, with the troops heading directly to the front. In December 1941, the advance of the German army group called Center near Moscow was halted as a result of a successful Soviet counter-offensive. German troops were pushed away from the capital. On June 24, 1945, the victory parade took place on Red Square. From 1952 to 1957, the construction of high-rise buildings was carried out, which later became known as the Stalinist skyscrapers and became one of the symbols of Moscow in the Soviet era. In 1960, a new boundary of Moscow was formed along the Moscow Ring Road, MKAD, beyond which the city did not extend until 1984. In 1980, Moscow hosted the 22nd Summer Olympic Games. From August 19 to 22, 1991, the city of Moscow saw the August coup, organized by the State Committee of the State of Emergency, GKChP. By 1993, the constitutional and political crisis arising from the confrontation between President Boris Yeltsin and the parliament reached its peak. On October 3-4, 1993, there were attempts to seize the Ostankino television center and the shelling of the building of the Supreme Soviet, the Russian White House. The early 2000s were marked by major architectural transformations. The city underwent significant reconstruction. Multi-story office buildings were built, modern transportation infrastructure developed, elite housing appeared, and a new business district, Moskva City or Moscow City, was created. A major issue was the underdeveloped transportation infrastructure, leading to traffic jams and overcrowded public transports. Measures such as the creation of dedicated bus lanes, the construction of new overpasses and interchanges, increased traffic control like automatic video recording of violations, use of tow trucks, and the organization of parking spaces, according to Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin, resulted in a 12% improvement in traffic speeds in 2016 compared to 5 years earlier. Since the 1990s, the project of merging Moscow with the Moscow region had been actively discussed. In the summer of 2011, a more specific project for expanding Moscow's territory and decentralizing it by adding southwestern territories was proposed. This project, called New Moscow or Greater Moscow, was implemented in the summer of 2012. In 2018, Moscow, along with 11 other cities of Russia, hosted the FIFA World Cup. For this event, several important sports and infrastructure facilities were built in the city. In 2022, Moscow was named the best megacity in the world in terms of quality of life and infrastructure developments, according to United Nations experts. Moscow is home to the federal government bodies of the Russian Federation, except for the Constitutional Court, which is located in St. Petersburg, foreign embassies, and the headquarters of most of Russia's largest commercial organizations and public associations. Moscow is a popular tourist destination. The Moscow Kremlin, Red Square, Novodevichy convents, and the Church of the Ascension in Kolomenskaya are listed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Moscow is an important transport hub. The city is served by 6 airports, 10 railway stations, and 3 river ports. It has river connections with the Atlantic and Arctic Ocean basins. The Moscow Metro has been operating since 1935. Moscow is the sports center of the country. In 1980, Moscow hosted the 22nd Summer Olympic Games, and in 2018, the city was one of the hosts of the FIFA World Cup. In terms of green spaces, Moscow is comparable to some of the greenest cities in the world, such as Sydney and Singapore. The city has 436 parks and green spaces. Green areas occupy 55% of the city's total area. Moscow boasts forest and park areas like Izmailovsky Park, Timiryazevsky Park, Fili Forest Park, Moskvo-Ritsky Park, Lublinsky Park, Butovo Forest Park, the Botanical Garden, Neskuchny Garden, Bitsovsky Forest Park, the Tsaritsina and Kolomenskaya Museum Reserves, Kuzminki Forest Park, Kuskovo Forest Park, and more. As a city endowed with capital functions under the Russian Constitution, Moscow is home to the legislative, executive, and judicial federal government bodies of the country, with the exception of the Constitutional Court of the Russian Federation, which has been located in St. Petersburg since 2008. The highest executive body of power, the government of Russian Federation, is located in the Government House on Krasnopresnenskaya embankment in the center of Moscow. The State Duma meets at Okhotny Ryad. The Federation Council is located at the building on Bolshaya Dmitrovka Street. The Supreme Court of the Russian Federation is also based in Moscow. The Senate Palace is the working residence of the President of Russia in the Kremlin. Moreover, the Moscow Kremlin serves as the official residence of the President of the Russian Federation. As mentioned earlier, the population of Moscow is 13.2 million residents in 2025. Therefore, about 8.6% of Russia's population lives in Moscow. The most significant migratory increase is occurring not in Moscow itself, but in the belt of cities and districts surrounding Moscow in the Moscow region. Experts debate whether this process is beginning of suburbanization or, conversely, an extensive expansion of Moscow into new territories. The continuous growth of Moscow's population is primarily due to the influx of people from other regions. Moscow is the largest engineering center in the country, where a significant portion of Russian products, especially aviation, space, nuclear and military technologies, are designed. Production technologies are developed and materials are researched. Moscow is the country's largest transport hub. The city is at the center of a web of railways and federal highways. Moscow's railway network includes 10 main directions with 10 railway stations. The total length of railways within the city is 395 kilometers. Suburban trains linking Moscow stations with settlements in the Moscow and neighboring regions play a significant role in citywide transports. A major development project in passenger rail communication within Moscow is the organization of the Moscow Central Circle, which is partially integrated with the metro system. Moscow is the home to the international airports of Vnukovo and Astafyevo. Residents and visitors of the city also use other international airports located in the Moscow region: Domodedovo, Chkalovsky, Sheremetyevo, and Zhukovsky. From 1933 to 2010, the Bykovo airport served civil aviation, but it is now used only as a departmental helicopter port. On September 6, 2023, the metro station Vnukovo Airport was opened, making Vnukovo the first airport to be directly accessible by metro. Moscow is the center of a network of federal highways in various directions, connecting the capital with the administrative centers of Russia's regions and neighboring countries. Moscow has an extensive network of street public transport, including bus, electric bus, tram, and marshrutka, commercial bus taxi routes, which transport about 12 million passengers daily. Some routes also operate during the night. Until August 2020, Moscow had a network of trolleybuses, which for many years was the largest in the world. Trolleybus transport has been partially replaced by electric buses and buses. The formal reason for the closure was to free up streets from the overhead contact network, physical wear of the trolleybus fleets, and the moral obsolescence of the trolleybus concept. Currently, only one museum route remains in the city. Since May 15, 1935, the Moscow Metro has been in operation, serving as the main mode of transportation within the capital. As of 2025, the total length of the Moscow Metro lines is approximately 470 kilometers, with most of the route and stations located underground. In terms of the length of the lines, the Moscow Metro ranks 4th in the world. As of February 2025, the Moscow Metro has 271 stations and 15 lines. Many of the metro stations are architectural landmarks. Since the 2000s, metro lines have begun to extend beyond the Moscow ring roads. In 2016, passenger traffic was launched on the Moscow Central Circle, which had been used only for freight and transit transport since 1934. The line is a railway ring consisting of 31 stations, but it is positioned as a full-fledged 14th metro line. The movement on the Moscow Central Circle represents a city commuter train partially integrated with Moscow Metro, transfers and unify fare payment system. The Moscow Central Circle also integrates with suburban train directions, for which some railway stations have been relocated directly to the Moscow Central Circle stations. In 2018, the first northwestern section of the Big Circle line was opened, the second underground ring of the Moscow Metro. The line was closed into a circle on March 1, 2023. Moscow operates a car-sharing system, a short-term car rental service with per-minute or per-hour pricing. Car sharing serves as an alternative to personal cars, helping to reduce road traffic, density, and parking space congestion. According to the Transport Department, one car in the car-sharing system can replace 10 private cars. The advantage of car sharing is that you don't have to spend money on parking, fuel, car washing, or maintenance. As of 2020, 8 operators are parts of the Moscow car-sharing system. According to statistics, there are more than 3.5 million bicycles in Moscow. However, the first bicycle lane appeared in the capital only in 2011. By 2013, the length of the cycling routes reached 100 kilometers, including several long routes such as from Barclay Street through Philly Park to the Tverskaya metro station, 8 kilometers, and from Museum Park to Victory Park, 16 kilometers. City bike rental stations operate in the summer, as well as private rental services. The unified city bike rental system started operating in Moscow in 2013. At that time, 79 stations were organized along the Boulevard ring and on Frunzinskaya embankments. Each year until 2019, 50 new stations and 500 bicycles were added to the network. As of 2018, there were 430 stations in Moscow with 4,300 bicycles and 260 electric bikes. Moscow is the center of the Russian Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Old Believer Church, the Russian Ancient Orthodox Church, the Russian Evangelical Christian Baptism Union, and other denominations. All major world religions are represented in Moscow. Officially, there are more than 1,000 religious associations and organizations in the city. representing more than 50 different religious denominations. The largest of these religious organizations is the Russian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. It includes about 500 associations and organizations, 711 Orthodox churches and chapels, 6 male and 6 female monasteries. Moscow is a major cultural and tourist center in Europe and the world, with one of the richest historical and cultural potentials in Russia. The city has many interesting places, both historical, cultural, and architectural monuments, as well as modern entertainment infrastructure. Modern Moscow has more than 100 theaters. The most famous among them are the Bolshoi Theater, the Mali Theater, the Moscow Art Theater, Современник, Lenkom Theaters, the Taganka Theater, and Pyotr Fomenko Theater. There are more than 60 museums in the city, with the participation of Moscow State University, the Polytechnic, historical, zoological museums, the Museum of Anthropology, the Pushkin Museum of Fine Arts, the Botanical and Zoological Gardens, Moscow Zoo, were established. Among the many museums of the capital, the Tretyakov Gallery, founded by the Russian philanthropist whose name is immortalized in the museum's title, Tretyakov, should also be noticed. There are large exhibition spaces such as the Central House of Artists, the Manesh Exhibition Hall, and others. In addition to state museums, there are many private art galleries in Moscow, many of which specialize in contemporary art. Moscow has many different night venues, clubs, bars, restaurants, and cabarets. The main establishments are concentrated within the Boulevard ring, along Tverskaya streets, in the Ostozhenka area, the New Arbat, and Kutuzovsky Avenue. Moscow has 9 establishments that have been awarded Michelin stars, one of the largest culinary awards in the world. Here are numerous opportunities for children's recreation in Moscow. The most famous places to go are the Moscow Zoo, the Moscow Planetarium, the Experimentarium Museum of Entertaining Science, the Tymyryazov Biological Museum. In 2015, the Moscow Oceanarium, called Moskvarium, was opened at VDNH, and the largest in Europe indoor entertainment park of world-class Ostrov Mechty, Island of Dreams. As of late 2009, Moscow had 264 higher educational institutions, including 109 states or municipal and 155 non-state institutions. The student population was nearly 1.3 million. 11 Moscow universities have the status of national research universities. In 2018, Moscow hosted 12 of the 64 games of the FIFA World Cup, including the opening game and the final game. The matches were held at 2 stadiums, Luzhniki 7 games and Spartak 5 games. Moscow has a large and growing network of hotels and accommodations, with major international hotel brands represented. Recently, Moscow's parks have undergone modernization and reconstruction, becoming more child-friendly due to improved infrastructure. Many parks offer bike and roller rentals. In 2015, as part of beautification program, over 12,000 children's playgrounds were renovated. Hope you enjoyed the ride. Sergey Baklikov, All of Russia channel on Baklikov Live.